summoned through the dimension of sound. People explore the musical world, which they believe to be true. But there is a world, unheard by some, that is filled with stories of an unknown reality, a jazz side.
Episode 8 of Tales from the Jazz Side is with singer-songwriter Jua Howard. This is another first episode. Now this time I'm talking with a musician that I've never worked with and I don't know extremely well, so it's not one of those, this is one of my friends from 112 years ago. Now, I met this young man a few years back at Jazz Connect's annual conference, which was held in Manhattan. And we started up a conversation, and I discovered that he was a vocalist and a songwriter. And for a few hours, we just sat and talked about the ins and outs of the business. We briefly talked about the frustrations of being a singer and working with musicians, teaching, booking gigs, promoting those gigs, promoting CDs, all the usual music business stuff, which is, by the way, what this conference is basically about, the industry. And at the time, I had finally committed to doing the podcast, and I was preparing to launch the first show, which would be a few months later in June, in connection with my 20-year anniversary with playing with the Michael Franks Band. Jua and I exchanged numbers, and I told him that, once I got the show off the ground, I would love to interview him. And since the show, I had to remember, is Have Podcasts Will Travel, and I also knew that at the time he lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, I really didn't know when I would be in that area, or if I ever would be, but, you never know. And, of course, a couple of times he was in New York City visiting, but for only a limited amount of time, so our schedules didn't allow for us to connect. So finally, I think a year passed, and Jua was in the Big Apple finishing up this new CD of his, and he emailed me to let me know that he would be in the city. And so from there, we arranged to record, and that brings us to the show today. Now, I knew of Jua's music, but only from recordings. I had never really had a chance to hear him live, and I had the fortuitous opportunity to hear him perform live at an event held just recently at BAM, which is the Brooklyn Academy of Music. He was there as part of the Onaji Allen Gumbs group New Vintage. In the small amount of time that I've known Jua, I've noticed a few things. First of all, in addition to his wonderful vocal ability and, this exciting and sincere rapport he has with an audience when he's telling his story, I noticed that he's also a very determined and very focused artist who is consistently working on ways in which to strengthen, his singing and his musicianship. And he has an adherence to improving the musical exchange between the people that he performs with. And that's really nice to see. On my show, I tend to really have, I'm drawn to guests that have this ability to really connect. And that's one of the things that I really admire in artists. And lastly, the thing that I notice is that he's a very, very nice and kind person. And that's always a pleasure to meet people in the industry who are humble and are very generous with their time and their knowledge. And so I just feel it was really, I really had a great time, basically, in interviewing him. And I'm glad that he decided to do the show. So if you want to find out more about Mr. Jua Howard, you can do so by visiting his website, which is www.jusmusic.com. And he has a Facebook account and a Twitter account. And he also has an informative tweet chat that he does. I think it's once a month. Join me on Tales from the Jazz Side with my guest, Jua Howard. My guest today is vocalist Jua Howard. Hello, Mr. Howard.
How you doing today, Veronica?
Now, thank you so much for being a guest on Tales from the Jazz Side.
It is my true pleasure. I think, when you first mentioned it to me, I was excited even before I knew I was going to be a guest. So when you asked me, I was like, done deal. Just let me know when. I'll be there.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time out and, stopping by and doing this. It's really, really great to have you here. Now, I feel like this must be my period of not being able to pronounce people's names correctly. Last month's episode, my friend Debbie, and I've always had difficulty, pronouncing her name.
Sure.
You hear me saying her name like wrong at least 5 times in the show.
No problem.
But at least I'm consistent.
There you go. Hey, you commit to it.
I'm committed to it. But she talked about the meaning of her name. So now what's the story around your name? Did your parents have a specific reason for giving you that name?
Sure. Actually, my mother picked Jua from an African Proverbs book. And Jua means the sun in Swahili.
Oh, okay.
And so when she told me, she was, clearly pregnant with me and she was trying to think of a name that she thought would be fitting, she was going through this African Proverbs book and basically saw the name and she was like, that's it.
Wow.
I think it's fitting. A lot of people ask me about it and I was, it's like, oh, the sun, S-O-N or S-U-N? And I'm no, S-U-N, look up that one,
Oh, okay.
So... and over the years, like I said, I think it's a fitting name. I think it helps people remember it.
Yes. How do you pronounce it again?
Jua.
Jua. See, I pronounced it wrong.
No, you were close enough. I mean, most people do hua.
Right.
Or a lot of people, they'll pronounce it like it's some, Spanish. So it's like hua. They'll do hua. Uh-huh. And then some people like to be creative and they like to add it in and say Juan.
Oh, okay.
As if I don't know how to spell my name. Right. So so I said no, it's Jua. And when I was younger, teachers would mispronounce it a couple of times. We'd have to have a conversation. It's just Jua. It's 3 letters. Uh-huh. I think some people like to make it sing-songy. Yeah. So like Jua.
Yes.
It's Jua. It's Jua. It's real simple. So
what a great name.
Thank you.
You are my first guest on the show that I've actually never worked with. But I did have a chance to hear you sing live last week at the Cafe Live, BAM, Cafe Live at Brooklyn Academy of Music as part of Najee Allen Gumb's New Vintage.
Yes.
I really enjoyed the show. It was very exciting, and there were so many talented musicians and singers and poets, and there's a dancer, and of course, it was truly pleasurable to see and hear you for the first time, and I wanted to do that.
Thank you.
Now, how did you hook that gig with Onaje and New Vintage?
Sure, good question. I've met Onaje several years ago.
See, I even said his name wrong.
Yeah, I met Onaje several years ago. And this is the power of the internet, how I met Onaje. I think most people know Onaje, know him for different things. And when I knew of his name before he and I ever met, I knew him more from an arranging production standpoint. Definitely was arranging work with Phyllis Hyman and artists of that caliber. So I was familiar with him from that angle. So MySpace was the hot thing at that point. Had my MySpace page, and there's a wonderful woman out of Philadelphia who's married to a legendary DJ in the area, Sunshine Brown. And so she actually had one of my songs from my first album, song Dream, as like her title track on her page.
Oh, okay.
And I had no clue. I'm
Wow.
going through stuff, and I was like, okay. And people she has on her page are like, Howard Hewitt and Peebo Bryson and some serious heavyweights. And so when I looked on, I was like, oh, whoa, I'm on there. That's a blessing. That's what's up. Okay, you got my song playing. Awesome. So Onaje actually was MySpace friends with her, and he heard my music, and he was trying to figure out in relation to all the other more well-established artists, who is that and whose voice is that? So through that, he contacted me through MySpace. And so we started building a friendship through Sunshine Brown's page.
Wow.
And so through that, we just, over the years, we, talked about music. He was always and always has been very motivating and very inspirational to me as far as what it means to be an artist, owning your talent, and really helping me have a lot more faith in my talent and understanding what it is. Because there's been a lot of times where I'm just like, I'm through with this. I don't want to do this. And he's always like, you better stay with it, brother. Stay with it. You have a gift that is meant to be shared. It has a healing quality. So you're meant to share that. So throughout the years, we've just built that friendship and built a mentor-mentee type of relationship. I call him Uncle Najee, which a lot of us do. He has a tight relationship with the community. And so through that, when he came up with this new group, and I saw when it started, he started gigging, and I was like, man, if I'm ever in New York, when you are doing that, I want to be a part of that.
Wow.
And so it just kind of clicked, and I was going to be here for an extended stay. So when I saw he was doing the gig, I was like, I want to do that right. So he was like, all right, let's make it happen. So he brought me on in with these phenomenal artists, like you said, who are everyone from, teenagers to people in their 70s. I mean, just profound artists who, for me, it just helps, just to be a part of that. Like I told people, even if I didn't open my mouth and sing that night, I was good to go. That was just an extra benefit that I got to sing with these individuals. And then what happened was wonderful is that Onaje produced my upcoming album. And so we picked a song from the album that's one of his originals that he wrote like 20 years ago that's never been recorded. And so the song that we did, Maybe You Met Your Match, we did for that show. So really the first time this has been done live. So that was a good deal.
Wow. Well, you did an excellent job.
Thank you so much.
Like sometimes, I get like really nervous, you hear someone's album or recording, and then you go to see them play and then in person, and then you just kind of like, okay. You mentioned something about, and actually when we met at the Jazz Connect.
Yes,
and one of the things we were talking about, we had a conversation around performance and performing and the mentor type of situation.
Yes.
So that's really, really interesting. Now, in reading some of your background, you've been identified a couple of years back with the neo soul, and you made a name for yourself in that circle. And although you haven't really, tossed it to the wayside yet, it's still part of it. You took an interesting curve, and you kind of ventured into this jazz vocal arena.
Yes.
Now, from some of the stuff that I read in the background, you quit your 9-to-5, and you left Chicago. And that's where you were born, right?
I was born in Chicago. I've lived all over the nation, so it's been
See,
a long history. I've been a vagabond. I've been in movement, so it's been a lot of locations between Chicago and where I am now. So it started. I'm originally from Chicago, but when I was probably like 10 or 11, actually, my mother and I moved to Alabama. And so I spent several years in Alabama through high school.
Southern accent
exactly.
comes from.
So when you hear me talk a little country and over there and all that, that's from a little southern. Exactly. Down yonder. I've never used that one. Let me stop. But so went through high school in Alabama, and then I ended up going to college in Atlanta.
Okay.
And after I graduated from college, my mother had moved back home to Chicago, so I moved back to Chicago.
Okay.
Then from there, I went to D.C., lived in D.C. for about 8 years.
Okay.
And then from D.C., I was in D.C. when I released my debut album. And when I was more so really identified, I think more so with the neo-soul movement. And then from D.C., I moved to San Francisco Bay Area and lived there for some years. That is really where I got into the jazz per se thing and really started to really identify my sound and where I'm going with this thing within the jazz arena. The Bay Area really gave that to me, and that's one of the reasons I love when I go back there. It really is like a really another home for me to this day, because the Bay Area really allows artists to have a chance to really help identify their voice and really have a training ground where they're not forcing you to conform to this or that, or you have to sound like this, you have to sound like that. They take you as you are. Wow. And the jazz community specifically out there is very supportive, I feel. So I was in school when I went out there with the jazz school in Berkeley. And so with that and being around the vocalists and teachers and other musicians who are really amazing, you have this time to really just kind of experiment. You know,
Right,
that sounds right. That don't sound right. That doesn't feel right. And so through that, I was able to really kind of once again get into the jazz world and really kind of get my feet wet within this to say this feels right.
Right.
So this is where I'm going now. And then from California, I ended up coming back to the East Coast, where to Raleigh, North Carolina. So now I'm between there and New York. So that's my long story of movement.
No, that's great. Now let's go. Let's move back to the part of Berkeley where you went to the Jazz School Institute, and you were the first recipient of this Mark Murphy Vocal Jazz Scholarship.
Yes.
Now, tell us something about that a little bit.
Sure. When I first went to the Bay Area, the jazz school had been in existence already as a community-based school. So that was a beautiful part of that. And that is the beautiful part about the jazz school, because you have a lot of working adults who can take classes in the evening, whether they want to learn how to play the bass, or they want to do a funk class, or they are brand new singers and they just want to get a sense of, how to better control their voice, how to put together a basic chart, things of that nature. So the community class really had been in existence for quite some time. But at that point, they had Susan Musarella, who was the director of the school, said, let's do a degree program. Okay. And so for me at that time, I think getting a degree in music at that point in my brain was like my way of validating my talent. I said, if I get a degree in music, I can go and get a job. And people are like, oh, you got a degree in music? Oh, you're doing something. Not could have sounded like, a frog. And I would be like, but I have a music degree. So in my brain, that was something that was important to me that I had to try out. So when I went to the school, I was one of the inaugural year students. Which is to this day is still a big honor for me. Okay. And so it was maybe 7 or 8 of us vocalists in addition to the instrumentalists at the school. Okay. And so the first year we went around, and so they created this Mark Murphy Vocal Scholarship. And most people who are familiar with Mark Murphy, who I feel is really just a legend with the jazz vocal realm. I really feel like he's a one and only. Yes. And he spent quite a bit of time for several years out in the Bay Area, and he really was a mentor to a lot of vocalists in the Bay Area who are still out there nowadays. So like the vocal director of the program, Lori Antonioli, was one of his mentees. Oh, okay. And so her and Kitty Margulis and I think Madeline Eastman, a lot of them worked with him as young artists when he was there. And so he had such an effect on these vocalists and helped them in their own creativity based on his innovations, really, vocally. Right. And so with that, Lori named the scholarship after Mark. So to give him something back for what he had done for all the vocalists within the Bay Area. So that's how the vocal scholarship came to be. Oh. And so the first year when they announced it, I think it was at like our fall end of the semester performance. And they said, they had talked about it and we picked our first recipient and they said my name. And I was like, what? Veronica, I was standing there like a deer in the headlights. I was like, they didn't just say my name. Right. And because I was like, who's going to get it? I was ready to support whoever and be like, that's awesome. But it never crossed my mind that I would be selected as such. And it had a lot of effects on me, I think, at that point, because it really validated my move to the Bay Area and why I chose to go to school at that point and let me know that I was on the right track. Right. And a big part of that was for whoever receives a scholarship is that you have this promise of being, the next, having this ongoing artistry and becoming an artist in your own right, which is really what Mark Murphy has done. Right. And so thinking of it in that way, that really solidified my decision to become a jazz musician, jazz vocalist. Like, okay, this is it. I've done something right. So that the scholarship really to this day is I would say definitely is one of my proudest moments. Okay. Just because it really did so much for me. And I think anytime that, from a vocal standpoint, or really anything that you can have your name attached to something, I feel with Mark is a huge honor. Right. And one of the best things about that is that when I received the scholarship, I remember receiving it, and I got some mail at one point around Christmas time, and I got a Christmas card from Mark Murphy. Wow. I thanked him, and said something saying, told him but he sent me a Christmas card, and I was I was floored.
Right.
I was almost in tears just because I was just like, wow, this is not happening.
Wow.
So yeah, huge honor for me. Huge
So now,
honor.
when you went to that part to Berkeley, California, or the area where the jazz school is, why did you go there? What brought you there? Did you just say out of the blue, I'm just going to go to? You looked at the different schools and you said, I'm just going to go for this school because you like the area and you. Is that why you?
Good question. Actually, one of my best friends, who was my roommate at the time in D.C., was doing a job transfer. So I was working full time at that point for the Gates Millennium Scholars Program because I worked in higher education for several years. Okay. So I was a project manager within a leadership developments program that they had. So I took my vacation, went out there, and I was like, "Oh, I'm digging this. This is kind of nice." And I had already been thinking about educational programs to get back into school. Right. So I did my research, and before I even went out, I was like, "Well, let me check it out," because I was like, the thought of moving and trying something new is appealing. And I'm a firm believer in stepping out on faith. So I've done that over the years, and I think with what we do, it's mandatory.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
To do what you do, and I think to be successful at this and really get to that next place, you have to step out on faith within this career. So I was like, let me try this out, and so I called around the Bay Area, and a lot of them kept talking about the jazz school for vocalists. I was like, okay. So that led me to speaking to Lori and speaking to Susan. When I went out there, I met with both of them, and they really sold me on the program. So when my roommate moved, I was like, well, I'll go. I'll go. I got into the school. I'll make it work. And it really, and I did, and once again, it was really that stepping out on faith moment. And I'm so grateful that I did that for myself. I think at the moment when I first went out there, I was looking at myself like a fool because I was like, I ain't got no job. I'm broke. What's going on? But I was living in like South Bay area, not far from Stanford, so I was on like a shuttle and 2 trains to get over to Berkeley every day, like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, to get to school. But it was all for naught. I mean, it really was, one of the most influential parts of my life musically. I tell a lot of my friends that being out there and being a part of the jazz school really saved my life musically. Because I feel like if I had not gone at that point, I probably would not be singing right now. I probably would have left this alone.
Really?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I would have, because I was having a really bad time with it in D.C. and the per se community and what that may mean. And a lot of people not coming through.
Well, yeah.
And people, I'm a really nice guy, and I try to take people at their word. So a lot of people, once again, with the industry, promise a lot, say a lot. If this comes out, let's do this. And nobody was coming through. People are booking the same people. Right. They're looking over you, and no matter how much talent you have, it was very cliquish.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I'm getting lost in the shuffle. And so maybe at that point I was like, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I need to, maybe go to grad school, do something else, get deeper into the higher education realm, and, help students with education and keep moving forward. So when I went to the Bay, like I said, that was stepping out on faith. That was God to me saying, this is for you.
Right.
As long as you do meet me halfway, I will meet you the other halfway. Yeah. So it really, really worked out. So that's why I said the Bay Area has such a special place in my heart and always will, because it really gave me a lot.
Wow. Well, Willard Dyson, Michael's drummer, he's out of Oakland. He's there. Is Jazz Sawyer? Was Jazz Sawyer? Did you get Jazz? Yeah, Jazz is on all of our records.
Yes.
So I love me some jazz. I love jazz.
Jazz played a lot with one of the guys, a really good friend of mine, Matt Clark, who's an amazing pianist, who's originally from New York. He plays with Matt sometimes out in the Bay Area, and that's how I initially came into contact with jazz, him playing with Matt. And Matt actually co-wrote about 3 of the originals on my new album coming out. So Matt's awesome. So that's how I met Jazz.
Wow, yeah, because Jazz is on all of our CDs, and whenever he's in New York, we try to schedule making a record around him.
That's right.
I love him. I've known Jazz forever, but wow. Now you have a bachelor's degree in English as well. So now, do you plan on do you write your own songs as well?
Sure.
Do you have
I'm getting better with writing. I will say definitely lyrics, definitely.
Okay.
My first album, without a doubt, we wrote most of that. I went the old new school production, get tracks the first time around. Got a lot of tracks from different producers, and we wrote around it, did the melodies and that, and I did the vocal arrangements and things like that. This second album, this one coming out now, is definitely within the jazz realm, so live instrumentation. A lot of the lyrics that are original, I wrote those.
Okay.
So I'm getting better with it. What I'm trying to do now is get better with actually writing when it comes to the instrumentation side of really getting to the core of, knocking out the chord changes and actually writing the entire
exactly,
song in addition to just lyrics and melody.
Right.
Stop being lazy.
Right.
And really get to the nuts and bolts of actually writing the entire song. So with this piece, with this new album, I was able to really work with some great musicians who I was able to collaborate with, to put it all together. But that's one of my ongoing goals that I try to work on getting better with the writing process. But lyrically, yes, I definitely dig into that in 2 seconds and try to become better as a lyricist to make sure that I always have something to say and that it's reflective of who I am as a person,
right,
and that people get it. I think a lot of times people write stuff nowadays in the music world, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right,
that makes absolutely no sense. That's not deep.
Right. Well, I had a friend of mine, Chris Osborne, a great painter. She paints all these beautiful portraits of people like Jimi Hendrix and Billie Holiday and anyway, she and I, when she worked at Tower Records and I worked at Tower Records a trillion years ago, she was really good friends with Abby Lincoln, and I had the opportunity to go to a couple of Abby's birthday parties.
Oh wow!
And one of the things that I had a chance to, because she's like who I want to be when I grow up. One of the things I had a chance to ask Abby was about her lyrics, because I always felt that she wrote these very inside personal lyrics that she really connected to, but I could connect to as well. And she said to me something that I always hold with me now, and thinking, and especially in choosing songs going forward, and that is, she said, you want to write, as you were saying, write about what you know at the time. She said, if I'm 78 years old, I don't want to be writing about, I'm going to go get me some good stuff. She said it just doesn't, and I that really held true for me. Unless you're in your 80s and you can go get good stuff.
Right.
But she, and I realized that sometimes singers will be singing songs about getting it good, and they're like 90 years old.
Right.
And so there is a contrast that doesn't kind of align itself properly.
Exactly.
And I thought that was really interesting. So I used that as well when I think about writing tunes. Now you had mentioned, first of all, I wanted to get to
that story. That just made my day. I love it. That's ironic that you mentioned that, because actually one of the tunes, and I'm not trying to plug it, but one of the tunes on the album actually is an Abby Lincoln tune.
Okay, well, we're going to get to that, because we're going to get to, because I'm getting ready to ask you about that. But before we do, you did a debut CD called Anticipation, which was released in 2007, and you have some really wonderful,
thank you.
standard songs and contemporary songs on that, and that was your debut. Now, that debut meaning you were coming from that kind of soul music to this kind of curve into the jazz.
Sure.
What did that CD represent for you in terms of that transition?
Sure.
When you were
that album for me, honestly, was to prove to myself that I could do it on my own.
Yes.
I was working a full-time job. I was on the road about 80% of the time, working as a recruitment officer, helping, once again, students of color get into college. And that's still a very important part of my life. But so when I was feeling that need, the music was getting left behind. And I said, I need to do this for myself. I need to stop hoping and wishing that a record label was going to come and knock on my door and say, Jua, you're wonderful, and let me give you a record deal and give you all this money. That was not about to happen. So I said, I need to do this for myself. So I started doing the research, found a great studio right in Alexandria, Virginia. Met with the guys there, and the guy who runs that Times is a great guy. He really worked with me and kind of helped me through the process and really gave me a lot of time, and I wasn't stressed over a lot of stuff. So I would come off the road, hit the studio late at night, do some songs. I'd write in my hotel rooms. I'd write in my event table sometimes, and just have it ready. So when I came back, I was ready to go.
Okay.
And so when I got through that, it was just, it was proven like, okay, I can do this myself. I learned a lot through the process. I had a great songwriting partner. So we really pulled that together. And for me, that was it. It was just to get the music out there, have something to say at that time. That project was kind of a story, kind of telling, from a relationship from the beginning to the end. It kind of follows that trajectory, the way I sequenced the songs. But also, that album is really chill. It's a real kind of groove, chill orient type of album. And I did that on purpose because for me, working day in and day out, especially in D.C., traffic, driving,
yes.
all I kept thinking about it, that people need something to listen to either on their way home or once they get home and they start de-stressing and relaxing. They get, their wine or whatever they need to help them get into that place. And they put this album on and they can listen to it from beginning to end and just vibe out, close their eyes and vibe out. And that was a major point of that because that was my life at that time. I needed something that was just people could just chill to. They got it. One of the things that always meant a lot to me was that people would always contact me and say, we listen to it with my wife or my husband, things like that. And this song means this to me. That meant a lot to me because I was like, they get it. They got it. Without me having to say anything, they got it because that was the point of it. So that was a twofold point of just, like I said, speaking from where my life was at that point, also just proving that I could do it on my own.
Yeah, and it's a good feeling when you have a theme and you have a concept about a project and you implement that, and then people actually get that whole stream of consciousness that you have on that. That's really a great feeling. Now,
so.
You had mentioned earlier about this new album, this new CD.
Sure.
I call things albums. There's no such thing as albums
with
anymore.
you.
Well, they actually are. You can actually press them now.
I'll still say albums, yeah.
Yeah, so right. So
right
now, what
on.
are you working on? Now, with the CD that you are, is it completed or are you?
I'm pretty much there. I've wrapped up. I did a couple of days of just some vocal overdubs just to kind of tweak a couple of things that I wanted to tweak vocally. But the bulk of it was done in the fall. The rhythm section came in. We had, percussionist and horn player. Everybody came in. So we knocked that out in the fall. So everything in the studio from a recording standpoint is done. So at this point, I'm in post-production. So I'm in the mixing phase now. So we're shooting for early summer release. This release date has moved quite a bit, but the beauty of it is that I can move it because I'm in charge of it. So,
right. Okay. So I was going to ask you: are you producing it?
I am.
I
own my own company, so I put the first project out through my own company, and so same thing with this. I almost put it out through an independent label, but that didn't work out. But so I was like, I'll put it on my own label. That's fine, and so. I, dictate when it'll come out, but, Onaje Allen Gums did produce the project.
Okay.
Amazing.
So
he produced it.
Okay.
Amazing arrangements, just amazing arrangements. And, he plays on it. But then I have Vince Ector on drums and Gregory M. Jones on bass and Gary Fitz on percussion, Roger Byams on horns, Sean Kenner, great guitarist who I've been friends with for several years, who also arranged a few of the tunes. And actually we wrote the title track, was one of his instrumentals that we kind of put all together, which was a last minute addition. So I have some great players on it. So I'm so excited to get it out there. I'm just trying to, do this last little bit of, the beauty of mixing and getting everything together and then mastering and in the midst of all the business and marketing and PR and radio and all that. So I really wanted to take my time with this just so that I could do it different from when I did the first project. Clearly, I've learned a lot from, since then and really want to take the time to do this the right way. I didn't, excuse my language, but want to half-ass this.
Yeah, no, hey.
If I'm going to put the money into it, it's not in my pocket.
It's yours, right?
I have as I call her, I have a great momager who is about business. She handles business. So we're very clear about timelines, deadlines, working to that. Okay, this is done. So with my publicist, okay, cool. This needs to be done this far out.
Right.
Let's do that. And so, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, don't look at it like that when it comes to their albums. They put stuff out just haphazardly, and everybody does their own thing, but for me, I'm about organization so that I can give myself the best chance possible.
Right. I got it.
To put it out there. So I'm excited. So I'm looking at an early summer release in June. And it's going well.
Oh, well, I wish you a lot of luck on it. I know it's going to be great, and I can't wait to hear it. Now, are you ready to walk down into the basement with me?
I am ready to go.
All right.
I got my walking shoes on now.
Okay, you got your walking shoes on?
Yes, ma'am.
And remember, you got to have that flashlight that doesn't quite work. Once you like you get it on there, and then all of a sudden it's like, now it's not. I don't know why they even bother. And I think I mentioned this in another show. If you go and you do the light switch and the light bulb blows, that's to me it's a sign. It's a sign saying just don't do this. Just don't do it.
Yes.
But you wouldn't have a movie then, I guess, if you didn't. Okay, so now first question: tell us about someone that you have worked with who is a little frightening to you, but in a good way.
I had to think about this question. I'm kind of I'm always about being, not a perfectionist, but I can get a little bit of nervous when working with people who I do respect. But I would definitely say that the individual I can think of who scared me in a good way was Keith Kilgo, the drummer for the Blackbirds. And when I first started working with them in the D.C. area, Keith was one who hired me and who I first met.
Okay.
And I didn't know what the heck I was going to audition for. I didn't know what was going on. The rap music, I was like, this sounds familiar. Okay. But at the point, he's just an intense kind of personality to me. And, early 20s. And I'm like, what is going on? Okay. And he's kind of looking at me and like, okay, that sounds good. Not smiling. And okay, we'll try this. Let's do that. And I'm just trying to figure it out, trying to make sure that, I'm singing some harmonies that are within the changes and they make sense. I don't sound crazy. Right. He's like, so he doesn't tell me to get out. But
was this in your jazz part
this
or
is,
in the?
This is still in the midst of in the midst of me putting out my first album.
Okay,
I still was, and this was actually the process with the Blackbirds actually was one of the things that helped me get to that point of like wanting to do more jazz, because that was such a part of their sound, of that fusion sound. Yes. They're based out of jazz. And despite the funk and all that, I mean, Donald Byrd and the Blackbird is, that's a core part of what they do. And so singing background for them, that's a key part of what you're doing. And so it helped me learn to listen in a different way. And so that started me on that path of like, you know what, I need to try this more, because this fits more with where I want to go, because it gives me more freedom the way I see it. But Keith was an intense character for me during rehearsals, and I'm like, that's not what I sung. And they're like, well, you need to find another note then, bro. And I'm like, okay. Traveling and things like that. So I would just usually I was pretty quiet unless I had to sing. Okay. I would talk to the other background singer, Juanita, who was a veteran, who was amazing to work with, she gave me a little nudge. It's okay, Jua, but Keith was great, simply because after we would do a show, he'd come out of nowhere and be like, Jua, you sounded really good, man.
Wow.
That was great.
Yeah.
Man, you're right on track. And we had talked about working together on other projects. But, that working with him, like I said, just kind of made me take a step back and pay attention more. Because I think you get to that point where, especially I think groups or whoever you work with, I think who have established something and that people respect the musicianship of the music that they've created, it's not about you. It's so much bigger than you. So it's kind of like, it's like you want to be a part of the bigger picture. So I'm like, okay, I'm a vocalist within the Blackbird sound and the group. So it's like, what do I need to do as a young vocalist to get that sound to be successful within that? So I need to shut my mouth and I need to listen to what they're saying. And I need to listen to what's going on. And so that, if I'm meshing, so I'm just kind of part of the overall wall of sound. And so, and when I think that was a part of probably, I think, why he, kept me around and dug me, because, I'm really easy to work with, but I know my stuff and I'm a professional, I think through that process, I learned to be that much better at it. So Keith, definitely did me a favor, and he was never nasty to me at all. It just, some people have just an intensity to them
and
how they, so you're just like, okay, what's going on? So, so definitely Keith, I would definitely say, scared me enough so that I was paying attention to what was going on to make sure that I was doing the best I could.
Right. And it brought you to that awareness of what the function is, as all the different functions that a vocalist can have.
Yes.
I mean, we are musicians.
Yes.
And if we think that way, then we understand we are the side musicians
Exactly.
that are part of it, even though it's the vocal thing. And
Sure.
that's great. That's a great story.
And I remember that because, out of Chicago, being from Chicago originally, Blackbirds were huge in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
All
No,
my
we know, I know.
family
Walking
grew up.
in
Exactly. And I remember that song because when he told me, well, I want you to do the ad-libs at the end, I was like, ooh, okay. And I remember coming and tell my mother I had this gig, and she was like, who? And I was like, the Blackbird. She was like, the Blackbird. I said, yeah. She was like, what you know about that? And so when we would do gigs, people would look at me and be like, you're a little young.
Yeah, right.
To be. And I'm like, look, I can do the job, But, I remember doing this, one of those moments of being scared. I remember doing sound check, and we doing one of the songs that Juanita and I ended up going up to the front and actually singing as a duet.
Yes.
I was terrified. I remember that, and Keith was looking at me and we were singing it through and he was like, man, what you doing? And I was like, huh? He said, you need to end the song? Right. And I'm like, what do you mean? You need to end the song. Right. What are you doing? And I was
just kept
like,
going on
right. And so I was looking at his face and I was like, oh man. So just a part of that, like you were saying.
Yeah. Wow. My God. Oh, yeah. I could tell you some stories around that one, but I'll wait till I have my own self on my own show. Okay, second question.
Sure.
What is the scariest work in any medium? That's like either painting, photograph, book, movie, television show, radio broadcast, that you've encountered?
I'm really, oh gosh, I was embarrassed. I was like, I'm going to be embarrassed to tell this. I really am. But, I mean, not that I'm not going to share it, but
right.
I was embarrassed to share this, and only a few people know this. But the scariest thing that I've encountered over the years, and I was a child, and and this is ironic because I'm a horror person. I love going to see horror movies.
Me too.
I love it. And most of them are pretty crappy these days, but I love a good horror story.
Yeah.
But the one movie, and this to this day scared the living daylights out of me, was Blackula. And
Blackula.
Blackula. And I'm
maybe the name of it would be terrifying.
And I was so embarrassed. I was like, but I remember seeing that as a kid, and I was like, okay, Blackula, let me see this. I had nightmares for like 2 weeks.
What was it about that made?
I don't know. And I've always tried to figure out, like, what the heck? I can't watch it now. It still has, like,
really?
it just has a certain effect. I don't know if it's the fact that at that age that I saw, like, this vampire who looked like me. Who had the skin color as me.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that may have been it because it was something that, I could put my finger on. It was a little more tangible because I'd like somebody could be across the hall from me. Like, this is just, and to see this brother as a vampire.
Because only white people are vampires that I know of.
Right. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's scary, but okay.
Except for Blade.
Right,
He's
right.
like
but that's different, right. He's trying to defend us.
Right.
He's
fighting the...
Right.
But... that's interesting that you say that point that you make, that it was someone that you could truly identify with.
Yes.
Because I think that's what really scares us when we are viewing or reading or seeing anything visually that brings that psyche fear up.
Yes.
Is the way we identify to it.
Very much so.
With it. And,
and I think I was been trying to figure that out, and I was like, why is that movie? But literally 2 weeks I had nightmares, and I don't watch it now. It's just, I don't.
Wow.
And there are friends who watch, they don't want to watch, The Shining and all these some other movies. And I'm just like, I love that kind of stuff.
Right.
But, I think the psyche, I agree, like recently, this is not a horror movie. I saw the movie, I think Olympus Falling or something with, I think what it deals with the president being held hostage. I think it came out this past spring.
Yes.
I watched it on Netflix.
Right.
And that was scary to me because of the simple fact of living in D.C., I'm watching this plane, just start shooting up, the National Mall and shooting at the White House. And that scared the bejesus out of me for the simple fact of that was very real.
Yes.
And I don't like movies like that because I feel like that gives people ideas. And I'm just like, that's too close to home because you'll look up tomorrow, people are crazy.
Yeah.
And,
well, yeah.
you'll look up and you'll see something like that because you never know what's going to happen these days. There's always something, and that scared me for the same, completely different reason,
Right.
but for the similar fact of just like, living in D.C. for years, going past that almost daily, I'm like, that could very much happen. Like, that was just crazy, seeing those people this plane's flying over, they got into the airspace, shooting up stuff, and I'm just like, wow.
Blackula.
But Blackula is
I
it.
think I'm going to go rent that on Netflix so I can see it, so I can watch it really closely.
Like, Jua, you are a crazy boy.
How old were you when you saw that?
Oh man, I had to be about maybe 7 or 8.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, 7 or 8.
Young.
Those are real.
Yeah.
That's that time when, you're supposedly at 7, you begin to understand the difference between good and bad and right and wrong. So that's just some formative. Wow. Okay. So, next question and last question. What is the scariest thing that has ever happened to you while performing live?
Good question. I have a couple. One's particularly one, but like a side off. But the main thing that has scared me, and especially as a singer, and I think you've talked about this before on other episodes with people, especially for a singer, is based around lyrics.
Oh, yeah.
And when you don't remember lyrics, I remember you talking when you were talking the first episode with Michael Frankson, talking about, I think, a time he may have forgotten the lyrics, and you were kind of saying them, so he like, okay. Same thing with me. And I had no background, so you were telling me anything. It was New York. It was last fall, and I had not performed in New York in several years. And I was at Billy's Black up in Harlem. Great band. Najee Allen Gums on piano. I had Dwayne Broadnax Cook on drums, and I had Marcus McLaren on bass. Great band. And get to the first song, and I'm like, okay. I was starting with Joe Jackson, Stepping Out, real cool swinging version of it. I was like, all right, cool. Man, they started playing that. I was all caught up in it. That first part kicked in for my first. I didn't remember anything. I didn't remember any words for the whole song.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. And they're playing it, and the people are kind of looking at me, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I can be very silly in moments like that. So I was trying not to just fall out laughing at myself, because I've gotten to a place, thankfully, where I don't beat myself up when it comes to that, because that's life.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, let me do some scatting here. Let me throw some stuff in there and just act like it's part of the song. And I threw some but I didn't know them words, and I was like, Lord, please let some words come in my brain at some point. So they're going to be like, that's not what Joe Jackson didn't write there. There was some words to that song. And they go, and I'm like, this is my introduction back to New York. I was like, I was like, okay, this sucks. But
and in the blank, when you go blank, it is the strangest thing, because there is, you can't imagine, like you can't even like comprehend or think about what the song's about,
right?
To even like make up words,
right?
Do you know what I mean? Like, this song is about being in the circus, or this song's about, if you could at least get some idea of what the song's about, you can at least make up lyrics. But you just go blank.
It's right, because certain things, even if you worked on lyrics that that may be a little difficult to remember. Like a lot of times I'll do Joni Mitchell's Black Crow, and there's a lot of words to that song.
You don't use like a sheet?
I don't.
I use music stands now.
I'll use a music stand, and I'll have usually, charts and stuff up there, but very rarely do I look at it. Usually I'm okay.
Right.
But with like that song, I have references that will keep me back to where I need to be, like on that verse. I'm like, okay, I know it's this. Okay. That'll help me remember it. Okay. That day, I think I was just so nervous at that point. When they started playing, I was like, wow. And one of my friends in the audience, he was like, yeah, Jewel, we didn't know. I was like, yeah, I'll say I was in the moment. I was in the moment. I played that off. Luckily, I remember the lyrics, I think, like, midway through the song, and we took it on, but that terrified me, because I was like, I'd practiced so much, and I was like, man, people are gonna be like, who is this dude?
Right, they said probably that look on your face. They said, he don't crack.
Okay,
he done come back here to New York, but he on his way down. They always have some reason behind why something's happening.
Right. They're like,
and it's never a good thing.
It's never a good thing.
It's never like,
then if
he's reached a stage of enlightenment now, so he's transcended all that stuff. No, it's Always. Oh yeah, he on drugs.
That poor brother, he young too, boy.
You
That's
know,
up.
he young. You knew it was gonna happen. You knew it was gonna happen. It was only a matter of time. That's what we start saying. That kind of stuff.
I could have been like some singers who I've recently saw, which I will say I have an issue with, who, have lyrics right in their hands, holding it, reading from it, or they pull it up on their phone, and it's like you just see a bright light on their face as they're reading the lyrics because they don't know the lyrics,
Right.
which I have a huge issue with. Like, I'm just like, are you serious? Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, talk about a complete lack of professionalism. Like, this is I don't care if it's a hobby, whatever, you need to know the material. Even if I've seen people have words up on the stand.
Yeah, that's
but
me.
and you play it off, and that's cool. I've done that before, definitely. I'm like, but you play it off. But I mean, to literally stand there with a phone in your face,
that's
reading the lyrics, not to mention too like a Isley Brothers song or something. I'm like, everybody knows that. Frankie Beverly makes everybody knows that. What are you doing?
Well, I think a lot of that is, it goes back to what we had talked about at the Jazz Connect, which is the performance aspect of things. I was for the longest time really apprehensive about having a music stand in front when I'm singing, but I think of musicians, and I think a lot of them, they have charts in front of them so that they can reference it, and you don't always not looking at it like you have a phone right in front of your face, but it's always nice to have something there to connect you in case and a lot of times on my stand I have the song list, so people, I know what the next song is.
Definitely.
And blah 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 blah, but I noticed that too with a lot of the young people that are learning to sing, and now that they have these portable devices, they just pull it up. And I did a concert, a show in Indonesia, and one of the performers, Dr. Tompi, my friend Devi, who's the professor, so it's the doctor and the professor, but he had a stand that he could put his iPad on.
Yes.
Yes.
And he had I've seen more musicians do that now to kind of carry the music with them.
And it was like so, classy in a way because the lyrics were there.
Yes.
But we did some improvisation, and he called Superstition.
Oh, okay.
Which I kind of know, and I don't know, but it was so small. That I'm like, I'm singing, doing my part, and then I'm like, putting my face so close up to the thing and squinting to see what the next line is. Then I'm pulling back, and it was just kind of. And at one point I just started making up the lyrics because they're Indonesian, they didn't know.
They were like,
they didn't know what the hell was
good,
up singing.
Right?
They don't know if I was singing English correct or not. So it was, but it was definitely, the lyrics are definitely a thing, I think. But in your case, at an important event,
right?
That's always, I think, can be really terrifying.
It goes to really just the heart of who you are as an artist. Because I think at the core of it, we have our moments. Clearly, not gonna remember everything, and even stuff you've written. Sometimes I have the hardest time remembering. I'm like, what the heck did I write? And why did I phrase it that way?
Right.
But at the end of the day, the ideal situation is that. You've done this so many times, gone over this music so much, and it means something to you, so that you've internalized it. So to me, and when you internalize it exactly, you can be a storyteller and really get into the heart of the song, so that you're successful telling the story to the audience, so that you're able to touch them. It means something to them because it means something to you. Yeah. And I think that's where, when I talk about people who pull up the words, on the phone, that's the problem. I'm like, that means nothing to you. You're doing nothing for me. I don't even care if you have a nice voice. You're doing nothing for me because you're not stopping and talking to me. Like I was recently talking about Carmen McRae. She told that story. She looked at you like, hey, I lived this. Even if she hadn't, it was like, I lived this. Hey, Kat, you better get it. But that's the beauty of it. Yes. As a vocalist, or really anything, you have to understand it. And I think more instrumentalists are starting to understand. Some don't really pay attention to lyrics, and some do. The ones who do, to me, have a different understanding because they understand then why you're playing a certain way, because they're able to phrase it a certain way. As a vocalist, if we're backing a vocalist, we're going to play it this way because he's saying this. She's talking about this. So I need to play it this way,
Right,
to give
right.
it this inflection, to mean a little bit more to the audience. And so lyrics are so important, and and it's a core part of what we do. And so, I mean, even if you mess them up, here and there, and you get it, but the ideal situation is always to just get them so you're like, so it makes sense, and you're respecting the music.
Oh,
You're respecting the
absolutely. And
music.
the effort that the lyricist and the writer made to put the song together.
Exactly.
So anyway, this has just been beautiful.
Oh,
This has
thank
been
you
so
so
beautiful.
much.
Thank you, Jua,
Thank you so much.
so
This
much
has been a
for
pleasure.
doing the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It
Yeah,
really is.
and I have to get into Washington, D.C. That's where you are now?
I'm
No.
in Raleigh, North
Ra-
Carolina.
oh, that's
actually.
right. See, I
Yes.
never know
I'm
where
actually
you are. I'm
I-
always saying that.
I'm on the move. I'm a nomad. I just, Veronica, I'll tell you where I am, and hopefully our paths will cross at some point.
Yeah, because it would be nice to come and hear you play, or maybe sit and play together, or do something.
Definitely.
I would very much like to do that.
I would
Just-
love it.
just
Absolutely
so
love
much.
it. Yeah.
Anyway, but thank you so much, and that wraps it up for Tales from the Jazz Side.
Thank you so much.
The jazz side is always there, waiting for us to enter and waiting to enter us. So, until next time, unplug your ear holes, for you never know what worlds may be waiting for you.